If you watched my last video, you got to see a little about my first impressions of Newark. But let's back it up a little and explain how I got to Newark, a place I had never heard of prior, but somehow ended up living there for 5 years. By now you all know I'm from North Carolina. After I graduated college, I goofed off for a year, partied, worked 2 full-time jobs, one at Starbucks and one at the casino. And honestly, I was having the time of my life, okay? I was making so much money that even though I low-key knew it was time to move on and find a real job with my degree, I, like almost every other millennial, just couldn't. Because college degrees are worthless. I figured, I have my own place, I have a car, I have plenty of money.
Money on my watch, time is money. Money on my phone, I talk to the money. Money on my chain, the money hang with me.
I was totally independent, man. Paying all my bills and honestly doing just fine. Wasn't that the whole point of being an adult anyways, right? Being able to pay your bills. So after I graduated, I stayed for another year and I loved it. I loved living on my own and being around my friends all the time. I was basically having the full college experience minus going to class. So it was a win-win. But after that year was up, I was kind of like, I had to face the facts. I was like 23. And I was starting to feel like the grandma at all the college parties with my friends. Okay, not cute. But I thought about it and I told myself, I already stayed for 1 extra year, right? What's 1 more year? I'm sure I'll find a job eventually. My main priority was to never, ever move back in with my parents ever again. So, I applied for another apartment for another year lease. And in the meantime, the search for a real job continued. But I couldn't find one. And for some reason, the apartment that I applied to never called me back. So, yeah. And when they didn't pick up my phone calls either, I knew in my heart what that meant. Time to leave. So I very reluctantly moved back home. My worst nightmare. I said goodbye to my friends, the mountains, and moved back in with my dad. I immediately started working at another Starbucks just to have somewhere to work while I looked for another job. And long story short, I hated this new Starbucks. It was nothing like the one I worked at before with all my best friends. Almost all the people who worked there were awful. They paid me less than what I was making before, and they also did what some jobs do when you apply for a full-time position. They lied and said I'd be getting about 40 hours a week, but then they only gave me about 12 hours a week. Long story short, I was miserable, depressed, and broke. The only good thing about it was that my girlfriend at the time also worked there, and she was the one who suggested that I apply to be a flight attendant. So I did. And 3 days later, I got a video interview. Then a week after that, I flew out to Newark for my face-to-face interview. I had so little money at the time that my mom had to buy me my interview outfit. And my dad paid for my hotel for the night before the interview after almost having a heart attack when he saw where I was going to book myself for the night. It all happened so fast, y'all. It was like a whirlwind. I did land the job that same day. It had seemed like an eternity, but it was only about 6 weeks from the time I reluctantly moved back home to the time I had the flight attendant job. And oh boy, did I tell Starbucks to suck it when I did. Then after 4 weeks of training, they put me up in a hotel in Newark for 4 days. And after that, all us little baby FAs were out on our own. I think now is a good time to say that I knew absolutely nothing about being a flight attendant or the lifestyle. I didn't care about the perks. I didn't care about the pay. I only had 2 reasons at the time to take the job. Reason number 1, escape that hellhole of a Starbucks. Reason number 2, I was really excited about relocating for the job. I wanted a new adventure. I wanted to live on my own again. And the tea that I did gather in training was that most new flight attendants stayed in Crashpads, meaning that you have to bunk with a bunch of other flight attendants, usually in a house, apartment, or a hotel, because new flight attendants don't get paid enough to afford their own place. And since we're traveling for work so much, the idea is that yes, you have a ton of roommates, but it's not that bad because it's not likely that they'll all be there at the same time because you're all working multi-day trips. I got a tip that there was this place called the Swan where I might be able to find a crash pad. So I packed up all my things and drove over there. I pulled up to this interesting looking motel. Hi. Are there any crash pads available here? I'm a flight attendant. I believe all the crash pads here are full. Oh. That was my only lead. I didn't know anyone else in Newark, and I didn't have any money. And my first official day of reserve started in 2 days. Training had been unpaid, and yes, I was broke before, but now I was straight up busted. And not only did I not have any money, I didn't have a fucking clue. So I sat in the parking lot in my car and I thought, and decided that I'd rather sleep in my car than call my parents and ask for help. And that was that. Final decision. Wait! Call this number.
This girl might have a bed for you. Call her and ask. So I called this random number and spoke to this girl named Danny. She just so happened to have one bed available and said I could join her Crashpad. I was relieved, but not as relieved as I should have been. I mean, I had legitimately decided to sleep in my car in a motel parking lot in Newark and tell no one. And I thought that was a fine idea. I'll never forget that Crashpad. It was slightly larger than the average size hotel room, with one bathroom, a kitchenette, a table, and 10 twin-size beds lined up in a circle against the walls. My bed was the one directly underneath the big widescreen TV, which blasted day and night. But I had a roof over my head, new fellow FA comrades, and most importantly, I was safe. For the time being. Until I got woken up at 2 a.m. for my very first trip. But that's another video for another day.